Thank you for being here for the second half of the film and science panel. It's been a hugely interesting discussion for the first hour. And so just to sort of reiterate, this discussion is taking place under the auspices of the Woods Hole Film Festival Film and Science Initiative. It is an effort that we began a number of years ago, but in recent years, really put a structure around. The goal of the Film and Science Initiative is to bring together filmmakers and scientists to collaborate about stories that will result in better films being made about science and communicating science in a way that has a broader appeal and reaches broader audiences. So my name is Judy Laster. I am the founder and director of the Woods Hole Film Festival. We are in the sixth or seventh day, I don't know which day of the week it is, of the 29th Woods Hole Film Festival. Generally, the festival takes place from the last Saturday of July through the first Saturday of August as an in-person event in Woods Hole, Massachusetts. This year, because of the pandemic, we have been a virtual festival. We have 187 films in the festival and a number of incredible panels, workshops, and Laura Nix is our filmmaker in residence this year. She's given us generously of her time throughout this week. If you are in the audience, I would just ask that if you want to ask questions, please type them into the Q&A or the chat, and we will try and get to them as time allows. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists with us right now. Beth Murphy, who is a filmmaker, Principal Pictures, which is a film company here in Massachusetts. She is a documentarian and is also on the board of the Woods Hole Film Festival, and is a filmmaker whose work we are supporting under the Film and Science Initiative with a new production that she will talk about when we open it up for conversation. As I mentioned, Laura Nix is the filmmaker in residence for the 29th Woods Hole Film Festival. And joining us is also Zahiti Roman. And Zahiti is a third-year student at Arizona State University, majoring in environmental engineering. First-generation college student. She initially had some difficulty figuring out what she wanted to do, but inspired by her community, she decided to pursue work in water quality control at the state and city level. And she's born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona. So welcome, Zahiti. And when Daniel joins us, we will bring him into the conversation as well. So Beth, I'm gonna sort of turn it over to you to facilitate.
Hi, thanks Judy so much. I'm really happy to be participating in this panel and sharing some stories about, film and science initiatives that, have happened and some impact, results from that, and really where we see this kind of storytelling going and why we think it's so important. I thought I might, start by sharing a little bit of background. You referenced the project that we are collaborating on. And the title of this project is Our Future, Our Fight. And it features young climate activists, and we are then pairing those climate activists with climate scientists. And so, these are young people from age 10 to 18 who are featured, and we come to understand why they've been motivated to take action around climate change, around environmental justice, really understand the issues that brought them to this point, whether it's wildfires or water issues, droughts and floods, fracking issues, so many things that have motivated young people really around the world to take action. And then we're pairing them with scientists who are studying that very thing somewhere in the world, in the United States, in Brazil, in Turkey, and really connecting the dots so that people can really see that what is happening in your backyard is playing out globally. And while the young person is learning about the science that is the underpinning really for their actions, audiences with both film and with podcasts. This is a project that is both a film series and a podcast series. Then audiences are brought along on that journey as well. And so maybe I'll just go ahead and this is a production partnership between Principal Pictures and the Woods Hole Film Festival Film and Science Initiative. It's also in collaboration with the National Children's Campaign. And I'll go ahead and play the trailer for you guys. Okay, share my screen. Hopefully it's working. Let's see, share.
We're not getting any volume.
Beth, if you stop the share and then redo the share, and then at the bottom of the screen, it should say optimize video, and then also play computer audio for sound. And you're muted right now. We can't hear you.
I think we lost Beth until she comes back. I don't see her.
Yeah, Judy?
Do you want me to just take it up for a moment? And
Sure. Looks like
Okay.
she just fell off there.
until she's able to come back. So I directed a film called Inventing Tomorrow that was at the festival last year, and Inventing Tomorrow is about high school scientists from around the world. Each one is looking at a problem that is an environmental issue that's local to them, and they're motivated to do scientific research based on that problem and be able to come up with a solution. And we were faced with a couple filmmaking issues, which is how do we explain this science to people so that people can engage with what the students are looking at. And their scientific research is oftentimes very complicated. And so how do you take a really complicated scientific concept and communicate that to a general audience? And we also then were tasked with how do you make that engaging and interesting and emotional. And I really do think that it's incredibly important when you're talking about science stories that that story has emotion to it, because there's this sense that when people think about a science film, they think it has to be dry, they think it has to be abstract, they don't necessarily understand how it can relate to real life. And I think that that's kind of incumbent upon us as filmmakers to be able to figure out how to tell stories that are character-based, that have emotion as an aspect to them, and that there is a sense of purpose that's shown to the science. Because that's another thing that comes out when you ask people, why don't you engage with science? There's a sense that it doesn't relate to me, that it's abstract, that it doesn't relate to my life. And what you see in the film is that you see young people, because they're dealing with local problems in their community, they see why it's really important to do that work. And it's motivated by a deeply personal problem that affects their families, that affects their communities, that they know that they have to go do this work on. And that approach was very much into the way that we decided to tell the film. It influenced everything about the way that I shot the film, who the students were that I chose to feature in the film, the kind of music that we used. All of that, is hugely influential into the type of storytelling that we tried to do in Inventing Tomorrow. And we went on from that project, what we kind of discovered in that project was, when I was working on the movie, I noticed when we were doing the film, when I was casting the film in the developing world, because the film features students from Mexico, from Indonesia, from the United States, and from India. And when I was casting and interviewing students, we interviewed over 100 students for the film from all over the world. 60 to 75% of the students from the developing world were doing projects that were intended to have an environmental impact. And when I came back to the United States, that number dropped down to 10%. And so I noticed that there was this huge gap between who was actually showing up in the American science system to do this kind of work. And that was a very difficult gap to realize, and we decided to address that with our impact campaign. And so our impact campaign is focused on basically taking, looking at this situation where the young people who are living in the frontline communities in the United States, which are mostly urban and rural communities, are not making it into the scientific pipeline that is doing that kind of high level of scientific research that would be competing at a level that you see at like the ICE of Science Fair. So we're trying to get tools for teaching sustainability and for teaching basically the values and the approach of environmental justice, and putting that in the hands of science teachers around the country, so that we can get more young people who are living in frontline communities around the United States to be encouraged to become scientists themselves, to see science as a way that these issues can be addressed. You know, I think that can go hand in hand with a social and a political analysis and a kind of civic engagement. And in fact, I think it's really essential that these two things are not separated. And you do see a little bit in the American education system that the kids in the humanities and the kids in the sciences, they're really kind of following different tracks, and they're not necessarily having the kind of dialogue and collaboration that could be the most helpful to really make change in this area. And so that's another thing that our campaign is trying to do, is to create a bridge between these two groups of students, because I do believe that if you combined these two groups of students, they're completely unstoppable. If you take the science young people and with this environmental awareness, and you combine them with the youth activists, and that is a really, really important and unstoppable force. And that's why we have Xochi as a part of this conversation, because Xochi is motivated to do that work. But we'll get to that in a second. I'm wondering, Beth, now that you're back, if you want to continue with the trailer that you were showing, and then we can pitch it over to Xochi.
Sure. I just want to make sure that the administrator is not going to play it. No? Okay. All right, let's call that.
Beth, we're still not getting any volume.
I've hit optimize video twice now. I don't know why it's unchecking, but let's do this again. This is the last time I'll try to play it.
Beth, did you also in preferences, did you say play computer audio? Because that has to happen
Yeah,
too.
that's at the bottom of the same window, actually.
Jay, you're not able to play it on your end? I had asked that.
If you send me a link, I can.
Okay, I did. I'm going to let you go ahead and play it. So we get it there. So I'm going to stop my share.
All right, while we're waiting, Jay to tee up the link. So Sochi, Laura, would you like to bring Sochi into the conversation here?
Yeah, I think that I think that what we've been talking about is a focus on how important, when we're talking about science and film, and our panel is really focused on environmental justice and youth, and how do we tell that story. And so I'm just really interested, Sochi, if you could tell us a little bit about why you decided to study science and environmental engineering, and what in your personal life motivated you to do this work.
Yeah, of course. I started off as a chemical engineer, just kind of because I was really interested in pharmaceuticals. And then the more I learned about like the production and just like the effects that had, I kind of realized that really wasn't the industry I wanted to be in, but I really still like that chemistry aspect of it. So I'm like, okay, what's something else that like that I care about more, or that I'm interested in, that also has that chemistry aspect. So I found environmental engineering because it was like the next thing that I saw that would be the best fit for me. Because there's still like issues that you wouldn't think are that common, especially in the United States with the advancements that they have, especially in Arizona. Like I know with our Navajo Nation and with the Hopi tribe and a lot of other like Native American tribes, there's still a lot of arsenic in the water, which is something that I myself wasn't fully like too aware of until my freshman year, that I had a roommate who was from the Hopi reservation, and that's where she was first starting in civil engineering as well, trying to help with those issues. And then I know Phoenix is very high with pollution. Like it's a pretty large city, and the pollution there's also very bad. And the thing that like took me back the most is that nobody really seemed to care. Like nobody in the community, whether it be like older like adults or like people in my age group, nobody was really looking into these issues or focusing on them. A lot of it has to do with like just that gap with like the financial situations. Nobody's really focused on these issues because they can't see them, and it's not really a priority right now. So I just thought it'd be a way that I could give back to my community, just to help monitor, to make sure that everything is at a level where it should be, because I was really interested in just quality control when it comes to water. So at least helping in that at a local level.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm just curious, I know from my experience of talking to a lot of young scientists from making that film, can you share what you think how the youth perspective on these issues is different than perhaps someone from my generation? Like, what is it that you bring as a younger scientist, as a younger person who's interested in environmental justice to this conversation that my generation missed?
I feel like right now, especially, there's a lot more chance like to get that awareness, especially with the types of technology that we have. A lot of people are getting a little bit more connected with these issues, and it's easier to advocate for certain things when it comes to your social media. Like that's what we're seeing a lot of right now when it comes to like political justice or just any type of change. We're seeing all that starting through social media, especially when it comes to like our generation. That's where that's where movements seem to start. And then I also feel like we have that like idea in the back of our minds of like, okay, well, we have like all these beautiful things that we still need to see that we might not get that chance to see. Like I know it was a huge story when like the coral reef dying, that was one of the big issues like that blew up on social media, like, oh, like I might not get to see it in my lifetime because we're destroying everything. So like if we're not going to be able to see these things, like the next generation, like our kids, what are they going to get to see?
Thanks for sharing that, Zochi. I just want to share really briefly that I met Zochi because our impact campaign works with an organization called Chief Science Officers. And Chief Science Officers are 6th to 12th graders that are elected by their peers who are interested in science, technology, innovation, and leadership, and who feel very passionate to impact their school and community by using science. And that program is run out of an organization called SciTech Institute, and also in Phoenix. And you can follow up with us if you're interested in learning more. But Zochi is, in addition to being a college student, she's an intern with SciTech Institute and works with them on that program.
Wow, amazing. Very impressive. So I think we are ready for the video. Let's try it one more time.
Thank you.
Jay, if you can start the video, that would be great.
Yep, getting it ready.
And then Beth, after we play the video, I think one of the things that would be interesting for you to sort of talk about is, the work that you have been doing also in addition to this particular project around science storytelling, because you have a lot of work that you've done in this space, but how that's changed over time, both in the kind of films you're making, but also how you think about the audience who is going to consume that. I think you and Laura can both talk about that because, the traditional notion of a feature-length documentary is something that, particularly if you're trying to reach younger audiences, seems to be changing dramatically.
Climate change is not a lie! Do not let our planet die!
These young people, they already recycle. They use metal straws instead of plastic, but they realize that is not enough.
For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear. How dare you continue to look away?
It's really so fitting that our generation is the one doing the most shouting and protesting in the streets, because we're the ones that are going to be the most impacted by it.
The reality is, my generation has been committed to a planet that is collapsing.
We can't talk about climate justice without talking about racial justice. I started looking outside of my window, seeing the air pollution. I really needed to become a voice for my people.
You're looking at a scene that is probably reminiscent of hell.
A firestorm that just swept through my community. Trapped in that house with 30 people, fans and air filters just going 24/7. I started writing a letter to my congressman just like, hey, what the hell? Like, do something.
Being able to work with an environmental scientist to really understand the science behind what's happening right now is really important and would be an amazing opportunity.
Equally important for people who work on the science side of things to have voices like yours to get the message out there and motivate people to do something about this.
We deserve clean water, clean air, and a livable future too.
Youth climate activism should not have to exist.
I don't want you to listen to me. I want you to listen to the scientists.
This youth-led movement of people from around the world taking action, that's what's going to get us through this. And the science says we can do it.
So you heard in the piece, Greta Thunberg saying, don't listen to me, listen to the scientists. And that was something that was really, really inspiring for me, and really for the concept of this whole project. So, kind of got me thinking, Greta, we all know her name, but who are all the other Gretas out there? I mean, there's so many young people around the world taking action, and it's just, it's so inspiring. And then, hearing those words, and ringing in my head of don't listen to me, listen to the scientists. I'm like, oh, but we love listening to you. But we also want to listen to the scientists, and how can we, amplify both of your voices simultaneously. And so, I hope that this is something that really resonates with audience. I mean, Judy, you were asking specifically about, how am I thinking about the audience right now? There's always this, something we say, over and over, and I'll just repeat it, one more time, which is often when we're making films about, climate justice, climate change, environmental justice, there is a sense of always reaching the same niche audience, and how do we break out of that? And so I'm hopeful, even though the words, climate change can be an automatic shutdown for some of our population, that even though we are using that language because it's the right language to use to describe the project, that we can attract people to the series through another way. And I see that way as, showing these young people who have, as you said, Laura, that this and maybe it wasn't on this, it's probably on the earlier call, but the politicization of young people, hasn't quite happened, yet. There's this sense of, and rightly so, the innocence of youth. And what motivates them are these really, really beautiful, powerful sensibilities about, my gosh, like my future may not be there. I mean, what adult can't get behind a kid who's saying, I just want my future. Like, I just don't take that away from me. And so, so I'm hoping we can appeal to adults who can find what these kids are doing really inspiring. It's almost like, it's not a lot like American Idol, but it's that sense of you're watching these kids do something extraordinary. These ordinary kids have like risen up in this moment of, necessary, needed change to say something and to do something. And that, that the adults around them can see this and think that it's something that's really meaningful. And so that's how I'm hoping adults can kind of, come into it. For young people, I think it's almost somewhat of a no-brainer. I mean, I think that I do think that young people, seeing how other young people are taking action, will help them not only maybe be inspired to take action on their own, but help them to understand the issues. And because with the scientists being paired, most, really all of the activists who were featuring for season 1, have all expressed their desire to become more grounded in the science. And so when they're on this journey with the scientists and they're learning, more deeply about the science themselves, the audiences will be brought along on that journey, and also then have a better foundation in the science behind climate change, and understanding that, maybe this isn't something that, should be debated. The science is the science, and begin to look at it that way. So, but again, it's really through the kids. I mean, really trying to look at this really through children's eyes and see it as they see it. And so that's sort of the way in with the audience right now. And the goal is to have more kids, want to be involved in civic engagement and this type of climate work.
Well, so civic engagement, what does that mean to young people? So Chi, I don't know if you want to sort of talk about that. You're focusing on science, but for civic engagement, and how does film play a role in that? If you want to speak for your entire generation.
Yeah, when I think of
no pressure or anything.
When I think of civic engagement, I feel like I've seen a lot more come up with that, because I feel like every single year, or like almost every year, there's always like those statistics that they try to like hit us with, especially when it comes to just things like voting. It's like, yeah, you're always gonna see like the least amount of like show ups or like ballot counts for like the younger age groups, like 18 to like 20s. But I just feel like with civic engagement, there's a lot more that isn't really shown, kind of like just from little things that happen. And a lot of it, like I said, happens mainly through social media, and it kind of just spirals there into actual political action. Like I know when it had, with everything that happened, especially this year, a lot of it had to do with people actually choosing to address certain things that were occurring, and choosing to actually take a stand and go out and actually defend like their beliefs and what they think the change that needs to happen. So that's what I'm seeing a lot more of, especially recently, because it did seem like obviously there's been like protests and everything before, but it seemed like we had a few quiet decade or so, and now it's really starting to rile back up. So I like to think of like this generation just really getting tired of kind of being stuck in this norm, and just striving, like wanting to make that first step to changing everything. Like, okay, we're tired of like just kind of waiting for things to get better, or like hoping that things get better, and like fake promises put on by politicians. It's gotten to the point where it's more of like demanding to see change, versus fake promises that are kind of told just to like, once they get into office, or like once they basically meet their end goal, everything that they kind of promised, or like, oh, when did I say that? So we're kind of getting tired of just hearing what we want to hear, and we want to start seeing that type of change that they keep saying is coming.
And so, if we sort of relate to film storytelling, what do you see as sort of the role of science-based films in supporting the efforts for change? Do you think they play a role for younger people, or do you think that social media is more sort of a light bite kind of way that people actually get their information? Because even with the short form films that Beth is talking about with Our Future, Our Fight, that still may be too long for some people on a social media platform.
I do feel that a lot of the films that are actually portraying this type of action or like activism are still very important, even though we do have the social media. That's kind of what we use as like the tool for circulation. So like I know that I have seen videos similar to that, about different cases going around. Like I know when we had the issue with the wildfires that were happening in Australia, and then how we had the fires in California. There was like a lot of those types of videos just circulating, and I found those on my timeline a lot. And then I know just from experience, like on my personal social medias and like from what friends post, those are usually what get the most amount of attention in a way, because that kind of gives people like a more visual of like what's happening. Like, okay, it's easy to say like, oh yeah, like this person, that person, like they're doing this or they're trying to do that, but actually having that visual and seeing people like working for change, just like with Inventing Tomorrow, just actually seeing the students like go out there and try to make a change in their own community, that just kind of sparks something. I feel like it kind of leads to motivating others, be like, okay, well, if they're capable of doing it in like under certain circumstances, I really don't have an excuse when I have all these resources available to me to like try to make my own impact. Because I have a lot less like restrictions, I have a lot more access. So really, like at this point, the only thing holding me back is just personal choice. So I really do feel like those visuals do help.
That's a really good response. Laura, I think you wanted to jump in here.
Yeah, I think that I appreciate hearing that too, but it's why I really like that, that Beth, that you're choosing to work in short form, because once you start doing work in the educational space, you realize pretty quickly that as a filmmaker that's making feature-length films, you're just like a dinosaur, and it's not where you're going to kind of break through. And I'm really inspired by what I see the youth movement doing, and like Sunrise Movement is on TikTok, and I think that stuff like that really matters. I think that having like really short form videos in a format that people are accessing, that the dinosaurs like me, we can ignore that at our peril. I think that we have to be able to figure out how to engage people in a really different way. And long form films, I'm always going to, but we are often faced with, at the end of making a film, chopping our film down. And that used to mean, I've got my feature length film and then I have my television length, right? So Inventing Tomorrow first premiered at Sundance. It was 104 minutes. I cut it down to 87 minutes for the theatrical release. I cut it down to 82 minutes for its public television broadcast on POV. I made a 55-minute version for foreign distribution and for the classroom. And now we're in the middle of making these like 10-minute short films that just focus on one character or team in the movie. And I'm actually really interested in doing the Inventing Tomorrow TikTok channel and trying to do like 30-second pieces, because I think that that matters too. And we just have to figure out a way to engage that way. And I think that it's really, really important to sort out, to just look at the landscape and look at how people are actually engaging with content, and decide how we can kind of hop in that. And instead of just going to our norm, which is like, I'm making my feature length documentary. The other thing that does is that it opens up the chance for people to make the media, because the truth is that it's very difficult to raise the funding and for a 90-minute film and to make that film, and it's very difficult to get a film like that distributed. It's like, it's like half the work is very difficult to be able to get out there. And I think that it's incumbent upon us in the documentary field to be able to think about the way that we can create short form, distribute short form, and have that potentially be a parallel distribution into the distribution of the longer film. Because I'm not saying that there's no audience for the longer film, there is, but I think it is really important for filmmakers to kind of think about another track of distribution if you're interested in this type of engagement. And not everybody is, and that's also completely fair, but if you are interested in this type of engagement, I think it's really important to think about how to make that possible.
So Beth, like,
I agree. No, I think it's, you're right. It's about meeting people where they are. And so if the people that you want to reach are on TikTok, we got to go to TikTok. If they're on Instagram, we got to go there. And so, I think the beauty of sort of the long form mindset is, we are gathering an awful lot of media in this process that can be used in a lot of different ways across a lot of different platforms. And it's one of the exciting things, about it. I also think it's really interesting to think too about how, we're talking about, just like young people in the movement globally, and how, so many young people who are not able to vote, but yet are helping to drive what the agenda is because of their activism. And that's, I think, something that's, it's really exciting. And young people, when asked, when you think about the issues that are, most important to you, the most important for your future, 2 years running now, the number one answer was, climate change, that's the issue they think, has the most impact for their futures. And so, as more young people sort of, rally to this issue, I think, people who are voting are starting to pay attention. So I know that's something I found really interesting during this process, is that they're helping to really set the agenda for all of the issues that are most important to them, with climate change being right at the top of the list.
And I want to just add to that for a second too, that I think that the other thing that I found when we were talking to students internationally and in the United States, that I think it's really important to also think about this in a way that is more encompassing of something than just climate change and global warming. Because while that is a mortal threat and we have to deal with that, the truth is that water safety is an immediate issue right now for communities all over this country, and it's really important that is a part of this discussion, because I think that for people like Xochitl and a lot of other young people that I met in the US and abroad, that's something that's going to affect them much more quickly than perhaps rising sea level or all the range of issues that happen because of global warming. That's something that's going on around the United States, especially right now, whether that's what's happening on reservations around the country and the access to clean water, or I live in California, in all the issues that we have with water safety in Central area, that because of the pesticide runoff, those are communities that don't have access to clean water today. That's true for Flint, Michigan. I could go on and on. So we also have to listen to what people in frontline communities are saying are the issues, right? And what issues they are mostly concerned with, and also respond to that and think about where the need is, where those stories can be told, and start working with young people to be able to encourage and amplify their stories, help them tell their own stories, so that we are getting BIPOC filmmakers and young people from Indigenous communities to become filmmakers themselves. And because you've got two white lady filmmakers here, of course, and we are doing this work, and we are in a position to do this work. But I think it's also incumbent upon us to be working in the field in such a way that we can empower storytellers from every single community in the United States, especially frontline communities, to step into this conversation and be making the films themselves.
So our other guest, we are trying to get him into this conversation. I think he might be in the audience. Daniel, are you there? We'll bring him in when we can get him in, sorry. Beth and Laura, sort of as you look out at the landscape of films that are being made about, let's just really focus on climate issues. What do you see sort of the trend being? Do you see that there have been so many films made around climate issues that you're having to sort of adjust the thinking about the conversation that you're going to have about the issues that you're going to present, and who the target audience is going to be? I mean, I know, Laura, you're not working to make a second Inventing Tomorrow, but if you were, how would you change, if at all, the film that you made a few years ago to today?
Well, I think that there's a huge amount of documentaries that are information-driven documentaries about problems. And I think people are exhausted and overwhelmed in their lives. And I don't think that there is as much of an audience about that. I see so many films about devastating environmental issues all around the world, not just climate change, but about water safety, about mining, about industrial contamination, about plastic, you name it. And I think that people are super hungry and for being able to watch films about solutions and about activism. I think that what we've seen proven time and time again, and this is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the organization Solutions Journalism. They've done a ton of research about how that's really what people want to read. You start with a solution and you show people engaged in solutions, and you show people engaged in activism. And I think that it creates a phenomena of, if you see it, you can be it. And so when you see people creating change, whether they're an activist or whether they're a scientist, whether they're old, whether they're young, etc., that shows you, oh, I could join that group. I could be one of these change makers. And not only is it making people aware of solutions that we can publicize and get more funding for and put out into the world as a way to create change, because I think they need to see those images so that they don't feel hopeless. Like, you need to have films that show that something else can happen. But I also think that it not only does it leave people with a sense of agency and audiences with a sense of agency, which is something we tried to do in Inventing Tomorrow, but I think you're also you're engaging the audience in a way. You're not like, just drowning them with information and, oh my God, what do I do? You're showing a path. You're showing a pathway on what to go do next. And I guess if there was an Inventing Tomorrow too, I'd be really interested in showing how you can take young scientists and young activists and have that bridge and create that dialogue between the two, because I'm still seeing that there's a really big gap in that. And you have young scientists doing this work. You have young people working in science today who are creating these solutions. And there's just, so I think it's important for young activists to not just be talking to older scientists, but be able to talk to their peers and see what happens in that discussion, because that's so exciting to think about young scientists having that conversation with somebody their own age at their own school, or even from somebody across the country, so that they could see how they could be working together. I'm like, that just gives me so much hope for what we could do.
Daniel, can you hear us now? And can we hear you? Let's see if you unmute Daniel.
I can hear you.
Great.
We can hear him too.
Welcome, Daniel. I don't know if you can make yourself visible to us, but if not, we can bring you into the discussion anyhow. So we're being joined right now by Daniel Faber, who's a professor of sociology and the director of the Northeastern University Environmental Justice Research Collaborative. Sorry that you've had a challenge getting into this conversation, but I don't know if you've been able to hear the discussion we've been having so far either. But Beth, I want to bring you back in because I know that you and Daniel are doing some work together. And if you want to sort of set the stage for that, that would be helpful.
Here, Beth.
Sure. Hi. So I mean, we, because our future, our fight, there are a number of stories, throughout the series that focus on climate justice. And, I mean, Daniel's work in this space is world renowned. So, we're very hopeful that, he will, join the project and serve as one of our advisors. And so I don't want to put him on the spot. We haven't solidified anything quite yet, but we're really inspired by his work and plan to feature it in both the film and the podcast. And it's remarkable. I'd love for him to share some of the new work that they're doing around climate justice with a global center based in Boston. So Daniel, I'd love to turn it over to you.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, sorry for the technical difficulties. I think my computer now is speaking to me in Latin and spinning around by itself, so it's been totally possessed by the devil. I think we're at this historic moment. A lot of things are coming to the head, and it's really the first time in my lifetime that I think I can actually see climate change. We can actually feel it, and we're on pace to very likely have, it's 50-50 right now, whether we're going to have the hottest year ever recorded in the history of human civilization, and certainly the hottest in the Arctic. And so we now see that there are multiple feedback mechanisms that are accelerating much more quickly than were originally predicted, in the sense that global change is feeding upon itself. So there's a real sense of urgency to this action. And I think this urgency is being felt by the younger generations because it's really their future that is at stake. And so that's why we're really seeing now this mobilization among youth in the schools, and not only all across the United States, but all around the world, the rise of the Sunrise Movement and so forth, because we have very little time for us to see significant reductions in emissions. Brand new study came out recently, and goes further than the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports to state that we have about 15 years to see some significant reductions in our emissions, or else we'll pass this turning point where we're going to lose ability to curtail climate change. And if we get to about 560 parts per million, which is the path we're on by mid-century, then we're destined to warm by 2.4 degrees at minimum to 4 degrees Celsius. So translate that into roughly 7 to 11 degrees Fahrenheit at current trajectories by the end of the century. So at that rate, we've already seen predictions of somewhere between 20 and 40% ecosystem collapse by the end of the century if we allow that to happen. So there is a dramatic sense of urgency where we have to begin putting into action the knowledge and the scientific understanding we have to really begin launching us on the new path. And that's really what the center is about. And I would say that what goes along with that is this notion of justice, that it's really almost impossible to separate issues of climate change from issues of social justice. And in order to make climate change relevant to current and future generations, we have to connect the issues that are important in their own lives, jobs that pay a living wage, health care, affordable housing, and so forth, to climate change, and create a vision of how working for climate change can help to create a better future than even what we have now. It's very difficult to motivate people solely by fear, and I am fearful of what can happen, but it can be paralyzing unless it's accompanied by a vision of how climate change can serve as a catalyst for transforming society and making it better, making it more humane, making it more ethical, making it more just, making it better serve human needs. And so that's the challenge of building a mass-based climate change movement that is capable of taking on the most powerful corporate interests in the world, particularly the oil and gas industry, that are committed to keeping us on business as usual in maintaining fossil fuels in our future, to take on these very, very powerful corporate actors that are inundating our political system with campaign contributions and so forth. In many ways, what I call the polluter industrial complex has currently colonized the American government and putting out all types of climate denial information. That to build this mass-based movement, it means that we have to bring people together from all walks of life and show how climate change is relevant to them, how it can lead to a better life, and how it's connected to all these other issues. So we can find a way to develop a broader-based agenda which links these different issues together in a program for climate change. Then I think we can do that. And I actually think we're on the verge of creating such a movement. That's why I'm so excited right now, because I think we see the beginning foundations of how climate change can link to issues of racial justice, economic justice. And there's so much attention right now on issues of racial oppression, and it's very heartening to see the mobilization that's taking place. But obviously those communities that lack the political economic power in the United States, that are often the most vulnerable to climate change, they are on the front line. And so to make climate change relevant to these communities, it has to come through a justice lens. And so that's what we're trying to do at the center. And as we know, Hopi Navajo lands, where there's been tremendous struggles around the degradation of landscapes by coal mining, and in Louisiana, New Orleans, Hurricane Katrina displaced 175,000 African Americans. Only 100,000 of them ever came back. So even within this country, we have climate refugees. And the United Nations has estimated we may have 500 million climate refugees by the end of this century. So no one is immune, and the impacts are getting broader and broader. But we have to really look at this as both mitigation and adaptation have to be seen through a lens of social justice.
And so, thank you. So sort of back to the filmmakers, there's a big mandate here when you are contemplating how to tell stories on film. You can't tell every aspect of the story in every film that you make. How do you choose what part of the climate crisis you're going to feature or focus on?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I don't know if others want to answer that too, but my sister was a filmmaker, and my nephew made a film on the Cloud Factory, and it was about a little village environmental justice movement in Chicago. And the Cloud Factory was this power plant that was spewing out coal, burning coal and spewing out massive pollutants into the community. And it was causing all types of health problems and asthma. So the story was told through this little girl who was growing up in the community. And the focus here was on the profound health impacts it had on her and her family. The visits to the emergency room. And she began asking these questions, why? Why are so many kids in the community sick? And then it leads her in this investigation to look at the Cloud Factory through a critical lens. It's not a factory that produces nice fluffy clouds. It's a factory that produces deadly poisons that causes asthma and sends kids to hospital. So telling the story in a way which is deeply personal to the people in the community, where the most immediate and hard-hitting impacts are the ones that are highlighted, and then it leads the participant in a path of self-discovery. I think that's really emotionally powerful, because it's something we all do. We all discover these links to not only climate change, but other problems in our daily lives in ways that surprise us or enlightening. And I think that's often a really effective way to tell these stories, is through that personal connection.
I agree. I think that's totally the way that you have to go, is to link it to people's communities, to people's families, to show the personal nature of these stories, so that it's something that's universally relatable. And I know, Beth, I'm sure that you know that from your storytelling experience as well.
Yeah, and I do think things that are, connected to children's health in particular are things that, just speak universally to parents everywhere and adults everywhere. I'm thinking about one of the stories that we're following for the film and podcast series is in Minneapolis, and Jawaria Jama, who's a first-generation Somali activist, working on climate justice issues. What brought her to this work, we're just seeing the higher rates of asthma in her community, and trying to fight environmental injustice, and looking at the difference between what was happening in her community and a community of color, and what was happening in other communities, and seeing that disparity, and wanting to fight for and making these connections. It's so hard to say climate change alone is responsible for X, but it's all these cumulative factors. And so it's what Daniel is saying is so powerful, because it's it's about economics, it's about housing, it's about air quality, it's about all of these things are linked. And once you start making the connections, I think, and I see that as my role as a filmmaker is to, if people aren't making those connections well enough on their own, or don't have the personal stories, you may not have a reason to think about it because you're not facing it in this way, or you're facing one thing but not these other things. We can make those connections for people so that it's very clear how this is playing out. What is the connection between George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis, in Jawaria's community, and the higher rates of asthma that she's seeing, the higher death rates from COVID-19? What is this, why are all of these things linked? They are, and we can help connect the dots on those things, and in very powerful and very, very personal ways. And that's the storytelling that, you know, I like to do, which are these very intimate stories, these, you know, stories of people, and the, you know, the change that they're trying to make, and follow them on their journey and be brought along. And so you're, you know, it's one, you know, often one person's story, but you're getting insight into these much larger community, state, national, global issues.
So Sochi, I have a question for you though, as the representative of the entire younger world. Do you think that these personal stories resonate and make people want to motivate people for change? Or do you think that younger people are already beyond this and already sort of connect?
I feel like the personal stories do actually help just kind of place people more in like the shoes of like what other people are going through, because there is a large, especially with this generation, there's a lot more of like, I want to say where they're like open or like in touch about certain topics. Like I noticed that there's a lot more diversity and what's socially acceptable, and just a lot of people kind of looking out for each other. So I feel like just having that background of like seeing somebody else's story, somebody else's perspective of like what they're going through, that's what's kind of helping with like a lot of ignorance that goes around. Like just having that perspective and in a way encourages, and like it makes it make sense. Like it makes it click easier. Like, okay, like just because I'm not experiencing it, or like maybe I can't even really start to imagine what they might be going through, or like what other people might be going through. It's just kind of like that little peek of like, oh, this is like a real thing. This is actually happening. So just seeing it through somebody else's life, and like being able to see different factors instead of just like a story about somebody is different than them telling you their story.
Can I add one thing to both those comments?
Yeah.
Which are excellent. I think both of you are so right on this. And so when I back off and I think about this thing with writing or filmmaking, is what would constitute an emancipatory form of filmmaking? What is a type of filmmaking which is empowering? So telling those personal stories are really important. But being able to see yourself in that other person is also important. Like, what do you share in common with that person? What is your common humanity where you would want to care about that person and be part of a struggle to better their lives as part of the same struggle to improve your life? So what Beth was saying about making these connections are really, really important. And I think a critical lens is is key. So revealing structures of power that are the causes, not just how that people experience these hardships or their life, but what are the forces that are creating such hardships, whether it be any form of oppression or any type of environmental hardship. What are the forces that drive that? Because in the end, what we want to do is point to the possibilities of a solution, point to the possibilities of how people, if they become mobilized, can change the sources of this problem. Not necessarily personally escape it. You know, we all want to escape hardships, but we want to attack it at its root causes. How can we attack the root causes of social and environmental injustices? And so that's what I mean about a form of the emancipatory filmmaking. It helps lead us in that direction and can help inspire us to take action and provide a path for doing so.
So for both Beth and Laura, do you feel like your thinking about science-based films has changed over the past few years, as it seems like climate change issues become more critical and urgent? Do you feel like the kinds of stories you're interested in telling, or the type of audiences you want to reach, how has that changed?
mean, for me, you know, the film I did before Inventing Tomorrow was also a climate film. It's called The Yes Men Are Revolting. And that is using comedy as a way of getting viewers engaged. So almost all my films use this kind of Trojan horse model, which is like, how do you get people to deal with issues that they don't really want to deal with? So Yes Men is using comedy and this kind of pranksterism to get an audience in that might not watch a climate change documentary. Everything about Inventing Tomorrow was structured to be able to get people to watch this. Because if you take science and environmental justice and environmental issues, that's not a doc that a lot of people are going to see. But if you do a film about young people at a science fair, and we spent a lot of time doing character development with each film, so you get to know who they are and what their personal issues are. So there's kids who are struggling with shyness and not having any friends. That's something that a lot of people can relate to. There's kids who have financial issues to be able to continue their high school education or go on to college, and that's an issue that is another way of connecting with people. So even though there's these big science issues, there's also personal issues as a way to do that. And same with Yes Men Are Revolting. That was about activism and how do you keep going when you hit your 50s with like the kind of energy to do activism that you used to have when you were in your 20s, because life gets different. So I've always tried to figure out like what's the smuggling device, right? Like what's the narrative device that you can put something inside and wrap it up to kind of get an audience engaged that's outside. So you're not just preaching to the choir. And you have to do that from the get-go. You have to do that when you just like conceive of not only of what the subject of the film is, but everything about how you're going to make that film as well. And so I think that, you know, my other thing about that too is that I do think that water is an on-ramp to thinking about the issue of climate change, because it's something that's so immediate for many people. And when people can't wrap their head around climate science, they can very easily wrap their head around not being able to drink clean water. So that was why we didn't just focus Inventing Tomorrow solely on climate, because we believed that that was also a way that we were going to be able to get into public schools all over the country, was to be able to bring in an issue that people can't argue with. And because if we had walked in and saying, oh, we made a climate change film, I wouldn't be in 4,000 schools around the US the way that we are now. So that was also a part of how we conceived of making the film.
Beth, I don't know if you want to jump in here.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that for me, I've become just extremely interested in looking at the issue of climate change through the eyes of children. And so that has really become a focus of mine over the past 2+ years, and seeing that as you know, a way that I think older audiences can also be more engaged on the topic.
And I would say, think about children, why it's important reaching out to young people is because one of the big problems around doing climate change politics is that the biggest impacts are going to be felt on future generations, some of which haven't even been born yet. So politically and psychically, how do we connect and act today in the interest of future generations? You know, certain indigenous peoples, the notion of seventh generation, that you don't take any action today without considering its impacts 7 generations into the future. So the fact that future generations are not yet voting in this next election, I think it's really important that we do galvanize ourselves so that we can act in such a way in the interest of these future generations. So what you're doing in your films is terribly important, because it's a process of doing that.
Sochi, can I just put you on the spot, since I have already? So if you were making a film, if you were a filmmaker, what film would you make?
I think something that interests me that has to do with like, because I really like how Inventing Tomorrow did focus a lot on like the issues that the students are facing independently outside of the research that they were doing, because that's a big issue that I see in my community, where I feel like a lot people don't really pay too much attention to like the environmental issues that are happening because they're preoccupied with just trying to like get through that month or like get through that year, because a lot of people don't have that stability of like knowing like, can I like afford my bills this month? Can I afford rent this month? So I think it'd be interesting to like kind of like have a film just to see like the impact of more, I guess, like the economic and social, not like barriers, but effects that it has on like overall national issues. How like it's harder to focus on these issues that are obviously important to future generations, when a lot of these people are barely like trying to just make it through like current time.
I mean, that's really such a perfect point. And, you know, I think one of the things that both Laura and Beth are interested in as well, and I don't know if I'll take the luxury of speaking for you, is empowering, enabling younger storytellers to be able to also tell these stories through film as well. And they've both given generously of their time, and I would imagine will continue to do so. And, you know, Danny, when you talk about 15 years, I mean, sometimes for me, that's like, oh my gosh, that's tomorrow. But for younger people, that may be like really far away. So how do we bring everybody to the same place when everyone's living kind of a different reality too?
Yeah, and I think that's the importance of that critical vision, is showing how we all have a common interest in protecting the planet and protecting this climate which sustains us. If we don't have a shared interest in protecting the climate, what do we have a shared interest in doing? So I think, you know, using film and literature and other devices to show how our common humanity is rooted in the earth in which we live can be a very, very powerful device, and particularly for children. Yeah, I think of some of the most powerful films I've watched over the years, and that's often one of the devices they employ, and I think it's very effective.
Laura and Beth, do you want to sort of jump in here? We just have a couple more minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say that I think that, you know, the reason that we made Inventing Tomorrow was because there is I think we're at a moment right now where it's a moral responsibility of this generation to empower the next generation with the tools that they need to ensure their own survival. And I think that's about educating people on civic tools as well as STEM tools, because we're gonna need to do all of it to be able to get to the place that we need to be, which is creating change about pretty much reinventing many things of our society at this moment. Like, I like the saying that do not let a crisis go to waste. And we are in this crisis right now, and we have the opportunity to create deep change. We're in a moment right now in America where you see what happens when you ignore science. We're living through a COVID crisis that is the result of that. And so that one of the best ways that you can do that is by educating young people from a very young age. And this is something that has to start in elementary school, through middle school, through high school, all the way through the kind of people that Daniel is educating right now. So when film can be a part of that, it's great. But I think that the goal overall is that it's about basically handing over tools to a younger generation to be able to do this work. And anything that we can do as filmmakers, as professors, as scientists, as, you know, film festival directors, this is our job right now, right? Is to like how to hand over tools to other people to do the work to lift themselves up and to get to where we need to be.
Thank you. Beth?
Into that real quick?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with Laura, and the film was really excellent. I really enjoyed it. And one of the benefits of being a college professor is I get to see this progression. And and where they reach their pinnacle and they're ready to launch their careers. And I have so many students who've stayed in touch with me over the years. They said, you know, I had this concern, but I never considered it as a career path, or I never considered the ways that I could begin to integrate my ecological sensibilities, my principles around justice, or my concern for climate change into my work. And I realized that I can do that. So many of them take this knowledge with them, and it ends up transforming the places where they work, or how they go about doing their work, or even some of their career choices. And some of these changes are subtle, but some of them are really quite profound. And it's really a joy when I hear back from students, hey, I got my company to do this. Well, these aren't minor changes. When you get your whole company to go solar, and then you start ordering your materials from sustainably produced businesses and so forth, or when you begin inventing new types of technologies that are non-toxic or non-polluting, you know, like the owner of Seventh Generation committed to creating companies that made products that are non-toxic. That's part of changing the world, and they add up. They may seem small in isolation, but they all add up. So this is why this work is so important, because you never know what any one student and person is capable of achieving in their lifetime.
Well said, thank you. Beth, we're gonna let you speak, and then we're gonna give Sochi the last word.
Very good. I just believe so strongly that media really can be used as an engine for change and for social good. And, you know, I don't have any interest in making a film just to make a film. I'm interested in making films to have an impact. And I think documentary film and, you know, the ancillary work that can come out of it is uniquely positioned to do that.
So Sochi, again, speaking for your generation and even younger generations, you know, we talk about climate change, we have these amazing filmmakers, professors. It's a lot of heavy stuff that people talk about. Do you think that younger people see that they can have an impact and affect change? And do you think there is hope in a dark time?
I think that they do see that. And I think that there is hope. I believe that at the minimum, even if they think, I know even right now, a lot of people are trying to at least get them one step closer. Even if it's not like, yeah, we're not going to completely like make everything better, like over the span of like, yeah, next year, like completely solve all the problems. But I feel like they're really working towards that goal of at least making it easier for the next generation, so that they could progress, at least taking a step in the right direction to start healing like all the damage that we've done.
Well, that's good. We need you guys to pick up, do the work, because we're old and tired. We can't be doing this anymore. So, I'll speak for myself. Well, I want to thank our panelists. I mean, it's such an important conversation. There's so much to talk about. I think we're going to keep doing this work over time under the auspices of the Film and Science Initiative. And hopefully, you know, in the future, we'll be having these conversations live and in person in Woods Hole. And we will be looking at more films. We'll be hearing about stories of action that are inspired by these films. And, you know, I know that we could have spent many hours talking, so hopefully we'll be able to do this again soon. I just want to thank, again, the scientific institutions in Woods Hole that also collaborate with us on the Film and Science Initiative, the Oceanographic Institution, the Marine Biological Laboratory. You know, everybody is now engaged to move in the same direction, which is to make life on this planet better. So thank you very much, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.